Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for the Solstice Cloud Management webinar. We have a bunch of people that are still logging in, so please just hang tight and we'll get started in a few minutes. Thank you for joining everyone. Before we begin, I want to go over some housekeeping information. Please use the chat function to ask us any questions that you may have, and we will try to answer them either via chat or live after the presentation. We have a few people still joining, so we'll get started in just a few moments.
Hey, welcome to the Solstice Cloud Management webinar. I'm Chris Jaynes, CTO and founder of Mersive, and I'm here with Mike.
Hey everyone, I'm Mike Tolliver, Director of Product Experience at Mersive, and we're really excited to show you some of the new functionality in Solstice Cloud.
Perfect, yeah. No, it sounds like we've got a lot of people on. I'm pretty excited to see what we've got. So, Mike, why don't you just take us through the slides and, we'll take questions as we go or at the end and see what people think.
Sounds great, Chris. So I'm going to walk through the agenda for today. We're going to give a brief overview of Solstice Cloud in general. Many of you are familiar with it already, some aren't. So we'll go through a brief overview, some of the key features and benefits that it has. For the management piece, we want to do a comparison for those of you that are familiar with the Solstice dashboard, what you get in addition to the functionality that the dashboard offers with Solstice Cloud and the differences there. Of course, we'll talk about security and what the network topology looks like, and then we'll do a live demo of management within Solstice Cloud. Then we'll let you know how you get on board if you haven't already, and go through some questions that you have that you submit. So, as Kim mentioned earlier, please submit any questions that you have along the way in the chat window, and we'll get to them at the end. So, what is Solstice Cloud? If some of you are familiar with Kepler is what we launched in almost 2 years ago as a web-based, cloud-based deployment monitoring and analytics platform. Now, we've since rebranded that as Solstice Cloud. So if you're familiar with Kepler, just think of it as Solstice Cloud now. It's just we changed the branding on it, but the functionality has stayed the same, in addition to a lot more features that we'll be adding in. So when we launched Kepler, it was for monitoring and analytics, those kind of two tiers. And this webinar today is to launch essentially the third tier of functionality within the Solstice Cloud platform, which is management. And that's something that we heard loud and clear from our customer base and from the resellers, that we had this elegant platform for seeing your analytics data and for monitoring your fleet. You shouldn't have to switch back and forth through other platforms to be able to manage and maintain your configuration. So that's what we added in. On the monitoring and analytics side, the monitoring is pretty lightweight, but it gives you enough information that you need to make real-time monitoring and availability statuses available to you, and you can detect and resolve any issues that come up before they cause a disruption to your end users. And those amount to real-time statuses within the product and some configurable email alerts that you can turn on and off, and you can also turn them on and off for subsets of devices. For instance, if you only want to receive alerts for pods that are in a certain building or a certain campus, you can create a subset and filter that in that capacity, so you don't have to see alerts for the entire fleet. On the analytics side, we launched with some basic stats and some analytics that will allow you to see what your peak hours are, when your rooms are used the most, meeting duration, that kind of stuff. We've got a whole lot of exciting stuff coming down the pike for the analytics roadmap. I won't get into much of that right now because we really want to focus on management. But it's important to note up front the benefit of having your management, your analytics, and your monitoring all under one umbrella in one platform, because it allows us to take that data that would be in kind of separate ecosystems, put it in a single ecosystem, and you get a lot of value add on top of that from just having everything under one roof. It allows us to do have a lot more capability in the Solstice Cloud platform than we would be otherwise. So let's get to the meat of the matter today, which is management. Monitoring and analytics have been in Solstice Cloud for a while, but we're adding management today. And we did that for a variety of reasons. But the main one is that we wanted to add as much value as we can into this product for you, for our customers, and for our resellers. So with Solstice Cloud Management, you'll be able to quickly batch deploy new pods or adjust existing settings. We're doing a lot more functionality that you can get within Solstice Cloud Management compared to what you'll be able to do in the dashboard. We'll get to that comparison shortly. But you can maintain your messaging status within the Solstice configuration to easily broadcast any news or information to your Solstice-enabled spaces. Another big thing is role-based accounts and permission levels for your different users. You can have users of different permission levels access Solstice Cloud Management within the existing infrastructure of the cloud-based authentication that we've already built for Solstice Cloud. And visibility is a big thing. We give you visibility of your entire fleet with the ability to drill down to a single pod level. And that includes subscription status, the ability to request a renewal quote, even define your whatever date you want all the quotes to terminate on, regardless of when the pods were purchased. Make it a lot easier for you to manage your subscription status. And something that's already been in product for a little while. It was actually the first piece of management that we introduced in Solstice Cloud was the ability to do updates of new software versions for your pods triggered within Solstice Cloud. And keep in mind, at Mersive, we're a software company, much more than a hardware company. It is our value to you to continuously deliver more value within our software updates. So we want to make it easy for you to access that value. So you can do so in Solstice Cloud. One thing that you can do in Solstice Cloud that you couldn't do otherwise is having those updates scheduled for whenever you want. So if you want to have all your pods update to 4.5 at 2 a.m. this morning, you can do so. You can schedule that and then just come back in the next morning, and you don't have to stay after hours and make sure that no one's in the rooms.
Hey, Mike, I want to jump in here a little bit because I'm sure there's people on this call that are thinking, well, wait a minute, you guys have had management since you launched the Solstice Pod, 4 or 5 years ago. Why are you moving it to the cloud? What does that really mean for me? I just want to make a comment. What we did with the dashboard was really a bottoms up build out of controllable features as they arrived in market, right? So you have radio buttons, you have the ability to enable or disable, whether it's our VLAN capabilities or whatever it is. What this represents, and you'll see it in the slides coming up, is a top-down view of what we've learned over those years about how people really want to manage their workflow. So template-based, top-down, straightforward, scheduling, one-to-many, global at-scale management. So all that stuff we learned is reflected into this new product over the last 2 years of engineering. So think about the dashboard as, yes, it's capable, but it doesn't reflect the workflows that we've learned from our partners and our customer council over the last several years, right? That's why we did this.
That's a really good point, Chris. This is a good example of, the software iterative value approach that we've taken to continuously improve the product by having that conversation with folks like you on the end of this call, to where we can understand what those needs are and how we met those needs in the dashboard and how we can improve them with the next iteration of management tools. And that's exactly what we did with Solstice Cloud Management.
Yeah.
And as Chris alluded to, the dashboard's been here for quite some time. And we've been able to learn what the needs of the market are, what the needs of our customers are. And instead of taking everything that we learned and built it into the dashboard, into its existing tool, we realized we couldn't do that for a few things. We couldn't really build templates into the dashboard because the dashboard is it's a peer-to-peer tool that lives on any device that you want to run it on. It doesn't have like a central server that you could use to store point of truth data like your templates. And that's one of the main reasons that we decided to build management into the cloud, to give you that ability to have that point of truth. If you want to say, I want to define my standard for my welcome screen template to look like this, we store that in one location in the cloud that's available no matter where you are. It doesn't get overwritten. And we have that capability with the infrastructure and the architecture in the cloud that we didn't have in the dashboard. Now, before we go into any more detail on this, I should point out that the dashboard is not going away. It's going to stay exactly as it is, and it will continue to have management value that corresponds with the Solstice roadmap. So we're not taking the dashboard away and replacing it with Solstice Cloud. We're giving you Solstice Cloud management on top of that with another tier of management capability, but we're not necessarily taking away the dashboard for your on-prem tool. In fact, I think it's good to have an on-prem tool just in case anything goes out with your internet access. We don't want you to not be able to manage your devices locally. I won't go through this whole list, but the whole idea was that the architecture and the infrastructure of a cloud-based management platform allows us to do a lot more things. We can take advantage of modern web architecture that's much more scalable. If you have hundreds of pods, you probably you notice a little bit of slowdown in the dashboard, and that's because it simply can't scale with that architecture the way that modern web stack can. So modern web stack is built for hundreds of thousands of simultaneous parallel connections. We utilize some of that infrastructure. It's already been built, already been baked in the internet over the years, and alongside it, the security mechanisms that were built alongside. So with centralized management, you can do single point of truth templates that live in a single location. secure access from anywhere. You can manage your subscriptions. The user-based permission levels is a big thing. You essentially get that for free by moving to the cloud because we already have individual user accounts, logins for Solstice Cloud. You can simply maintain or manage what those user permission levels are on an individual basis, and that'll help you manage your fleet better with your team.
Yeah, one of the things that's my favorite on this list is that one platform for management and analytics. It might sound kind of boring when you read it out loud like that, but in reality, I have customers and partners who want to do things like show me all the rooms that have an average density of less than 2 people per day. And then when I find those rooms, I'm going to change the welcome screen to run an experiment. Can I get those rooms to be more occupied than they are? So that's really a unification of both management and configuration, and how do you get there through analytics, which I think is really the future of a lot of the roadmap that's to come.
Completely agree, Chris, and that's a really good point. The ability to have all this data under one roof gives you a lot more power to do valuable things with it. So you can group your sets of devices by how they're being used, not just by how they're being configured, and make intelligent decisions based on that. And that kind of is alluding to a lot of the stuff that we're thinking about in the analytics roadmap, which again, I think is really exciting, but I won't go into too much detail here. But to reiterate what Chris said, there is tons of value to having your management, your monitoring, and your analytics under a single platform. What does the topology look like? It's pretty simple. We didn't try to reinvent too many wheels with this. Like I mentioned, there's already pretty baked, pretty secure web architecture that has solved similar problems before. So we didn't reinvent any wheels. There's a cloud server that lives in the cloud. Obviously, we are using Google Cloud Platform as our infrastructure provider. And your devices that live in your internal network, which is this gray area here, they need to be able to access that cloud, obviously. They don't have to have direct access. You can go through a proxy. You don't have to open up general access for the entire internet. You can open up just the required endpoints, which we list here for you. And once those connections are available, then you can access the data from the cloud anywhere in the internet via the secure HTTPS connection to cloud.mersive.com. What does security look like? It's obviously important to us. It's important to you. And we treat Solstice Cloud very similarly to we treat the Solstice Pod. That means we do routine penetration tests, and we respond to any vulnerabilities that we might find from those. And we're very transparent. We make those results available to you under NDA if you want to look at them as a Mersive customer. Like I mentioned before, web proxies are supported, enterprise grade encryption. If you're interested in the details, we're using SSL for our handshakes, TLS 1.2 for the encryption protocol with a 2048-bit RSA cipher underneath that. And as I mentioned before, you don't have to open up the entire cloud access for these devices to make this work. Only a small number of endpoints are required, and we let you know exactly which those are and what they're used for. Privacy comes along, right hand in hand with security. One thing that I want to reiterate, this is very important, that you use the Solstice Pod to share your content from your screen to the device in the room. That content data never, ever leaves your internal network, ever. We never take anything that you share on the screen that does not leave your network, that stays right there. In fact, we don't even cache it or store it on the pod itself. It's very, very secure in that capacity. What we do take is lightweight bits of metadata around how the pod is being used. So like if someone connects and shares a piece of content at this timestamp, that metadata is recorded and sent to the cloud so we can understand how the pod is being used and provide that data back to you as basic analytics. No personally identifiable data from Solstice users is ever collected. And that includes, we're not collecting IP addresses or MAC addresses of devices in the room or anything like that. We want to be very sensitive towards privacy concerns in that regard. And we are fully GDPR compliant. In GDPR parlance, we are a data controller, which has the highest level of scrutiny. Chris, you want to add anything on this before I move along?
No, I think you covered it. I think the punchline is that we, obviously as a company, most people on this call probably already know that we are very, very sensitive to security profiling of the Solstice Pod. That did not change when we started to look at how to architect this in the cloud. In fact, even the the process that talks to the cloud sits independent of the Solstice process that you use to share content to for a reason. That way we can firewall those two things separate from one another.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears for a second, and let's stop looking at slides and let's do a demo of what cloud management really looks like.
Cool.
Okay, so once you log into Solstice Cloud, like I've just done, you'll see our homepage here, which gives you some high-level information. And on the navigation panel on the side, you'll see kind of 3 tiers: monitoring, analytics, and now management. And under management, you have some new functionality that you didn't see before. We still have the updates in here. That's been in product for a little while. And if it's your first time through, it'll give you a little walkthrough that tells you this is what this functionality does, and this is how to do it. But the new functionality, the new pages that are under manage are this page that lists all your pods and your templates. And before we go too deep into here, I want to do a little bit of a refresher on the category side, because this becomes really, really valuable when you start to manage a fleet at scale. So I have created categories for us. I've used one of the recommended categories of room type that allows us to classify what our huddle spaces are like compared to our large conference rooms and classrooms, personal offices, all that kind of stuff. That gives me the ability to, on the management side, gives me the ability to select, hey, I want to select all my huddle spaces, and they may have some different hardware in there. They may not be outfitted with a hard codec or anything like that. And I may want to have different instructions on the welcome screen. So this gives me the ability to segment my devices by their intended use. But we also have the ability to segment them by other things too. And location is a big one. So I've got a category here that lists all my pods that are in Denver versus some field offices that we have around the US and the world. And the location plus use case gives me a lot of flexibility and a lot of value for managing those devices. And then a little bit down the road, it gives tons and tons of value for providing insightful analytics on how they're being used. Now, I've shown you some categories that we've already created here and already done, I've already filled out. But it's very, very simple to do on your own. If you, we have a recommended list, but you can also create your custom. Let's say if you're a university and you want to have a category for different campus types, I can say my campus here, and then underneath that it'll be South Campus, North Campus, so on. And it's very easy to set that up. And once those categories exist, then I can use the interface right here to simply do a multi-select. I can do a shift-click to select all, and until say, like, I know that those 6 devices or those 5 devices are in the South Campus. And at that point, that category, those assignments are there on the pods, and that makes it easier for me to manage these devices. I'm not going to go through the whole list of pods. That was just an example. So I'm going to go ahead and actually delete this category. So you can delete categories, you can rename them, you can do everything you want. And once those are set up, I'm going to go into my all pods page here for template assignments. And I'm going to filter, I'm going to sort by the pods that are manageable right now. And what does it mean to be manageable? Well, any pod that's imported into your Solstice Cloud account that's running at least Solstice 4.5 can be managed. If you have a fleet of pods that are pre-Solstice 4.5, then you can simply go to the Updates tab here and use our scheduled updates feature to upgrade your pods to the most recent version. And we had to make that requirement because we had to build some functionality into the pod itself so it could communicate with Solstice Cloud and be able to be managed. Now, I've got a lot of pods here in a lot of different places for a lot of different intended use cases. What I like to do is to filter by the pods that are in our production environment, and that means pods that are essentially in real conference rooms that are in use for collaboration usage. We have a lot of other, being Mersive, we have a lot of pods that are, in the field or in testing scenarios that are for development and all that. But our production pods that are in our offices, I've labeled as such, which allows me to filter in management. And I can go a couple steps forward and say, I want to look at all the pods that are in production rooms that are in Denver. And this allows me to get a much more targeted list of the devices that I want to have some visibility into and to manage. And so from here, I can look at these guys, and similar to the dashboard, I'm going to pick Rick's office here. Similar to the dashboard, I can go here on this pods detail page for Rick's office configuration settings, and I can see every setting that is configurable on this one individual pod. I can go in here and I can, if I wanted to disable screen key, I could. If I wanted to change some other functionality, I could. If I wanted to, add a different proxy in there, everything you can do in the dashboard for this one individual pod is right here now under Solstice Cloud Management. But we didn't want to just replicate the functionality that you can do in the dashboard. We wanted to be able to create templates so you can manage at scale much more easily. And that's kind of what we're going to get into with the screen and the corresponding template pages right here. And so what will I see when I'm using Solstice Cloud for the first time? When I'm using management within Solstice Cloud for the first time, what you're going to see is a lot of these unassigned states under these feature columns. And so these columns correspond to cohorts of settings that you can create templates for. We didn't create one grand template that encompasses everything because I won't get into all the details of why, but essentially that doesn't work as a model. So we split it out into separate cohorts of settings, and each cohort can have an individual template that you can define however you wish. But that doesn't mean that you still can't manage pods on an individual level. And it doesn't mean that your pods that have previous settings that you've already configured will be lost, because those settings that you've already configured inside the dashboard before you ever started using Solstice Cloud Management will stay exactly as they are. And we, when those pods are in Solstice Cloud Management, as of yet, they haven't been assigned to any template. And that's what this unassigned state means. So if I wanted to take Troy's pod, for example, here and assign it to a certain features template, I could. But I don't have to, on this individual level there, you still have the granularity of managing pods at an individual level. We didn't take that away. But what is really, really important, what the value add here is that we did create this construct of template, and we built templates, and we built the interface for management pretty much around the idea that you don't want to go through and manage every pod, every room on a one-by-one basis. You want to define your standard once, and then make it very, very easy to do day-to-day management from then on. So let's look at what that means. Under the templates tab here, which you can kind of expand and collapse, we have the same cohorts of settings that you will see in the column on the page here. So I'm going to go through. I'm going to pick Welcome Screen, and I can go here and I can create a brand new template if I want. I can give it a name for whatever.
So, Mike, one reason you might have your what you called cohorts of templates is I can easily imagine our customers that are at 4,000 or 5,000 plus rooms will have a global standard for example, their network settings, how those pods are attaching to the network. So they could apply that template to everything, but they might have a very different appearance template, for their offices in Germany versus the ones in, London.
Exactly. And you don't want the global settings to have redundant copies,
right?
Because of other things like, just because my pod's in a different time zone, now I have to create a brand new template because it has one setting that's different.
Right.
So that's a good point, Chris. That's exactly why we built templates out into cohorts, specifically to avoid that notion of redundant copies of settings that don't need to be copied within your
cool.
Within your template suite. So we can create a welcome screen template, and I can do anything I want in here. We've added a lot more functionality that makes it easier to get a preview of what your pods will look like. You can upload new background images if you like. By default, these will come with the default images that ship with the pod, but you can change those, of course. One thing, since Gen 3 hardware came out, there are 2 HDMI outputs. And so you can select, do I want my, if I have 2 HDMI displays connected to this pod, I want to have it in an extended mode here. And then at that point, it's going to ask me to upload a different set of images, because we didn't want to take your 1080p images and simply stretch them across two screens and make them double wide. That would not look very elegant. It would just have your content stretch. So you can choose up front what you want those options to be, upload your background images however you wish, and customize that. And the nice thing about this is that you only have to do it once. If you have one global standard for what you want your welcome screens to look like, what those background screens should be, all you have to do is define it here, and then you can apply it to as many pods as you want. And I'm going to cancel out of this guy and show you an example of what we've done here in our own offices. This is a template that we've already created for the welcome screen cohort of settings, and we're calling it city theme just because the background images are a few different skylines of cities around the world. Some new functionality that we've added into this configuration that's new with Solstice Cloud Management is a couple things. One of which is a lot of people ask for this clock to be configurable. I want to have that turn on and off. So we added that in. It's real simple. And if you notice, when I click this and unclick it, you get a dynamic preview in this preview pane over here that lets you know what it's going to look like on the screen. And this is kind of a thumbnail preview. It's not actually rendering exactly what will be on the screen, but it gives you good indication, which allows you to do things like, if my background images are white, I can't have white text on there, so I need to select a different text color. And you can make sure that everything's readable from within this interface before you deploy it. Another, what I think is a really valuable piece of functionality that we've added with Solstice Cloud Management is the ability to have your custom instructions much more capable than what they were before. One reason there is that you can use this interface to essentially enter rich text. So if you want to have some certain information bolded, some certain information in italics or different colors, you'll be able to do that and have some bullet points. This makes it a lot more flexible for you. But another big piece of functionality that we added here is, keep in mind, we're thinking about management from the perspective of templates now. And so if you have a template, that's a many-to-one construct. So you can't go in and type the room name hundreds of times individually on your custom instructions. Same thing with your other information that might be variable. So what we did was have a few different text replacement variables that you can embed in your custom instructions text here. And when those get rendered on the screen, like this bracket room name, that will be replaced with the actual name of the room in here. When it's rendered on an individual pod, when this template is assigned to a pod. So it gives you a lot more flexibility to make your custom instructions more templatizable, if that's a word, and would give you a lot more, a much more elegant interface to define what your standard is and manage it from then on. So I'm going to save this. I made a couple little changes. I put the clock back on. And as soon as I save it, it's going to let me know that that template was updated in a little toast message. And so I've essentially defined my standard for what the welcome screen should look like in my rooms. Once that has been defined, all I have to do is go to this All Pods page here and assign that welcome screen to as many pods as I want. I can do it to, there's a few that already have it, like Rick's office here and the portal wall pods. I can individually go through and say I want Ursa Minor to have the city theme, but I can also do things like, I can also do some bulk select. I can check individual boxes. I can go down the list and do a shift select to select a contiguous row or contiguous set of devices. But I can also do a bulk select for anything. But this is where the using your categories intelligently will really make it a lot easier for you to manage your devices at scale. So I know that our Blake 180 office, which is the another category that I've created ahead of time, that's where our logistics team lives and our marketing team, and they want their splash screens to be a certain way. So what I can do in here is filter by all the pods that are in production, that are in our Denver city, and that are in the Blake 180 office within there, and just simply do a bulk select and assign all of them exactly the welcome screen that they should have. And you can do this with not just the welcome screen. The same story applies to all the other cohorts of settings. If you want to have your feature set defined, what your digital signage should look like, your message center if you want to have some RSS ticker across the top and all that. You can do that in the exact same way. And all of those templates are right under here, under this tab that we found the welcome screen on. Now I won't go through and do a detailed walkthrough through each one of those because it's pretty much the same story. But that's the general idea. We want it to make it easy for you to define what you want your standard is and only define it once. And then once that's defined, you simply assign it to pods as you see fit. And once those assignments are made, it becomes really, really easy to make any changes. And so if I want to go back to this welcome screen template, so right now there are 4 pods assigned to this one. And if I make any changes, say I did want to have that clock disappeared, I could save it. And now that template will automatically propagate to those 4 pods that were associated with it. And I don't have to do anything really on an individual basis anymore. The many-to-one management is much, much easier.
Yeah, that's really cool, Mike, because now what you're talking about is once you've set up your template sets, if I want to make a change, I literally make a change in one place and hit save, and now it'll flow forward to my entire global fleet automatically, right?
That's exactly right. And that gives us the flexibility and the power of doing things like, hey, let's say a holiday is coming up and I want to have a different splash screen right here I want to have a different background image temporarily. I can do that much more easily now as opposed to having to go through, individual devices to do so.
And when you hit apply on that page, like here, where you've got, 9 or 10 pods that are live and one of them's been unplugged, probably somebody took it home given the stay-at-home era we're in, and you hit apply, what happens? That template immediately flows forward to all of those pods and they'll take on the new appearance. But the Milky Way pod, what happens when it comes back online?
That's a great question, Chris. So I could do exactly that. I could select a series of pods, and 2 of these are online right now and one of them is not. And since no one's in the office, I'm just going to go ahead and make this assignment here. I'm going to give these pods the city theme background. And so it's going to ask me for a confirmation. Just make sure you're aware that you're doing something in bulk here and hit confirm. And when I do that, it's going to say that this template was successfully applied. And it takes a few seconds for the background images to download to all the pods and for them to set. So these guys will spin while they're actually doing that download. But if you'll notice, Milky Way gives me a little different indicator here. And it says, if I hover over it, it says offline pending. Now what that means is that this is the benefit of using cloud management, to where we don't have to talk directly to Milky Way right now in order to make a change happen. We can tell the cloud that, hey, we want this pod to have this change, and that change is right now, it's pending. And as soon as Milky Way comes back online, for whatever reason it was offline, it's going to download the template changes that I just made and automatically apply it to itself. So I don't have to go back in and continually check. It's much, much easier to do. And so this will give me a little indicator that, pods are applying the settings that I just made. And like I said, it takes a few seconds for them to download large background images and all that. But it will let me know via the status when that's done.
Cool. Yeah, that's great.
And the one thing I didn't talk about is the other cohorts that you will see. We only are looking at 5 right now. You can access those from the network tab here at the top, or the settings. We split these into 3 different kind of hierarchical groups because we didn't want to have one giant table with too much information in it. So from this, the far right, the settings one here, I can go through and it looks like Sirius doesn't have a time locale setting, so I'm going to give it our Mountain Standard Time Zone, and so that means it makes sure it's very consistent with what timestamp it believes it to be. That's a very easy change for me to make there. But yeah, you can quickly iterate through all the different settings with your templates right here. There's one thing that we haven't touched on just yet is, what about settings that can't be part of a template? For one is the pod's name. We can't templatize that. That's unique for every pod. For one, I can just go in the pod detail page for that pod and give it a new name if I want, whatever that may be. But for the case of templates, there are some settings within a template that are still unique to a pod. And a good example of that is within the calendar cohort. So I'm going to do a quick demo of that. So for example, we've got a template here that uses Office 365 for the backend calendaring system. And this one, it's going to ask me, are we using impersonation or delegation mailbox? For this one, I'm going to say no, because we're not using impersonation and delegation. And so in that scenario, the credentials that each pod needs to communicate with Office 365, they're unique to that pod, because that's how they identify which calendar to grab from the 365 backend system. It's a very similar, I can create one from scratch here that would be that would essentially do the same kind of construct, but in this one, let's say that you're using impersonation mailbox. And so in this scenario, it allows me to take your admin credentials, enter in your, the correct password, and now that those two things are saved as part of your template, so you don't have to re-enter that every time. So I've created that template using that much information, and that's now available to me whenever I want to apply that template to some pods. So let's walk through an example of that. So I'm going to let's do a couple pods here. You know what? In fact, I'm going to take let's stop looking at 180 and let's look at the 160 office. And I know that all our individual offices, let's look at Troy's pod and Rick's office, they're all using Office 365 calendars with an impersonation mailbox. So I can make that assignment right now, find the template that I just created. And what you'll see that it's going to do after it gives me a confirmation prompt is it's going to say, hey, I want to assign this template to this pod, but you didn't tell me what Troy's pod's impersonation mailbox is yet. So it knows that it needs that before it makes that assignment. And so all I have to do is enter it in this quick little interface. And it's going to do the exact same thing for Rick's office. And it will do that on down the list. It will ask you for just the information that it needs, and it will save as much information as possible in that template for what you don't have to redundantly re-enter.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
That's really good, Mike. I know a lot of customers have sort of, asked or requested this ability to, both have the ability to apply a lot of settings at once, but then have our system intelligently ask you, hey, here's a unique setting. You need to do some action here to get through this process, rather than them typing everything over and over again. It's nice.
Exactly. And that was one of the benefits that we can do with template-based configuration that we really just weren't able to do in the dashboard. We understood that as a pain point for a while, and we wanted to provide the best possible solution. And that's what that really meant, doing it in Solstice Cloud Management. So we've walked through, creating a template, assigning templates, managing individual pods, and walk through some scenarios where a template may need some unique settings. But like we talked about earlier, the fact that you're using Solstice Cloud Management doesn't mean that you cannot use the dashboard. You still can. We're not going to say that any changes to a pod will be rejected for any reason. If you're an authenticated user, you of course can still make changes to your device. But what does that mean if someone were to make a change via the dashboard when you've already created templates for your pods in Solstice Cloud Management? Well, I can talk to a couple things for that. One of which is if you want to make everything be manageable for you, just through Solstice Cloud. Like I said, we're not going to explicitly restrict that, but what you can do is create your admin password that you want for the pods to have local admin access as part of your template. And once you create, let's say, I give it some kind of admin password within the security template here, I can make that standard password that I have as an admin password part of my template and apply it to as many pods as I want. And at that point, all those pods will have a consistent admin password that is manageable from a single place within Solstice Cloud Management via a template. And so if you wanted to restrict certain dashboard users from being able to have access. You could essentially use that method from here within the security template of Solstice Cloud Management. But we, of course, don't want you to say authenticated users can't make changes with the dashboard, because we want the dashboard to be there and available for you. So what happens in the scenario that I've created a template and assigned it to some pods here. And as you can see, the Office 365 calendar template that I've created for ChoicePod has been successfully applied. What happens if someone were to go in the dashboard and make a change that breaks ChoicePod out of the template that I just created? Like I said, we're not going to restrict any authenticated user from being able to make changes. But what you can do, and this is another benefit of having your monitoring, your management, and your analytics under one roof, is that you can have management-based alerts as well. And so I've done that right here by enabling alert that says, email me when a pod is unassigned for a template. And right now it's going to do that for all the pods in this fleet. If I want to say, hey, I'm really only concerned about the ones that are in Denver, and let's say that I'm the IT admin at the Blake 150 office, it's going to filter that for only the pods that are in the Blake 150 office in Denver. And so when that happens, if someone were to go in and make a change to Troy's pod that broke it out of the template that I just created for it, I'm going to get an email alert. And then at that point, it's up to me to take any action if I want to. So we're not going to, Solstice and Solstice Cloud isn't going to try to make assumptions on who has more power or whatever, thing like that. That's not our job. That's not Mersive's job. We want to give that power to you, though. So you can receive an alert if there is any kind of conflict in configuration settings, and then you can take the action that you deem necessary at that point. So that's pretty much it for the demo. Chris, is there anything you want to add before we kind of move back to slides?
No, I love the idea that, if you're in an emergency situation and you're on-prem and you pop open your laptop with our dashboard and you need to make a change in one room, you can still do it. But the way the sort of Solstice Cloud blankets over that can actually give you an alert when that happens, or even, in fact, block out local access or dashboard management. I think it's good from a security perspective, but it's also flexible. So very good.
Agreed. Thanks. And again, we will get to any questions that you may have submitted right after the fact, but I'm going to move back to some closing slides first. Solstice Cloud, what we've just walked through with Solstice Cloud Management is what we've, released as kind of the version 1 of Solstice Cloud Management. But just as with pretty much anything that we do here at Mersive, we're a software company and there's a continual roadmap. And so Solstice Cloud will continue to add iterative value and continual improvements, and as well as Solstice. And the benefit of having those kind of two things under one roof, under one umbrella, is that when Solstice adds new value, when it gets new functionality, like when we added HDMI in or dual HDMI out or inking capabilities and all that, then you get associated value in Solstice Cloud. You'll be able to configure any new functionality within Solstice Cloud according to that, as how that is released in Solstice. And you'll also be able to get some analytics on how that new functionality is being utilized. So we want to, drive home the notion that Solstice in general is a software that will be continually improved, and we want to make sure that conversation with our customers, with the market, makes the product as good as we can make it for you. The same concept applies to Solstice Cloud. The nice thing there is that we don't have to do a software release that you have to install in order to get new value. We can just update it in the cloud. So how do you get Solstice Cloud? So I'm sure many of you on this call already have it. And if so, then all you have to do is log into your Solstice Cloud account at cloud.mersive.com. If you don't, you need to have some Solstice pods, because Solstice Cloud doesn't really provide much value without the Solstice pod device on your network. And so if your Solstice pods are on a minimum version, you can import those pods into Solstice Cloud account via the dashboard. And I won't walk through that process right now, but there's plenty of documentation that will help you through. It's pretty easy. If you don't already have any account, if you're very, very fresh, it will create one for you as part of that process. You don't have to go somewhere else. And if you do already have a Solstice Cloud account, you can import as many other pods into that existing account as you want, as part of one fell swoop. It's very, very easy to do. For the pods that you import, in order to manage those within Solstice Cloud, for that management tier of in the navigation menu to be available to you, those pods have to be on 4.5. And that's because 4.5 is when we release the capability on the pod to be managed by the cloud. And like I mentioned earlier, if your fleet is not fully on 4.5, you can simply use Solstice Cloud to update them to 4.5 and then manage them from then on out. Let's see, full Solstice Cloud capabilities do require a current Solstice subscription. That's a good point to talk about real briefly. You need a current Solstice subscription in order to get the full capabilities within Solstice Cloud, and that means the full suite of analytics data, the full suite of monitoring capabilities. But one thing that will stay the same for you is your ability to manage devices. Because a pod may have dropped out of its Solstice subscription, that doesn't mean that you won't be able to manage it within Solstice Cloud or the dashboard. So that will stay the same.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We're going to jump into some questions now. We've been answering them live from the chat, but we also are going to have a little bit of time to touch on some and answer them here. We have a mix of customers. Some of them are already using Solstice Cloud to monitor and view analytics, as well as maybe dabbling in the management features. But we have customers who are primarily in dashboard. And I have a question here. If I move my existing pods from dashboard to cloud, will their settings already exist, or do I need to create templates?
That's a good question. Those settings will not be changed whatsoever by simply moving your pods into Solstice Cloud. Nothing will get overwritten. Solstice Cloud isn't going to make any assumptions that you wanted your pods to be in this certain configuration or anything else. So the exact configuration that you have right now will stay the same. But the second part of the question, the answer is also yes to that. You can also create templates on top of that. So you can move your pods into Solstice Cloud. One thing that I didn't really touch on during the demo, this would have been helpful, but you can go to any existing pod that you already have and create a template from its setting. So if you don't want to create a template from scratch to say, like, I know I've got my pods set up the exact way that I want, you can find one of those pods that are set up the way that you already want it to be and go through each of the cohorts that it has and create a template based on the settings that are already on that pod. Does that answer that question, Kim?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and Mike, it might be obvious, but I'll just point it out. You can go the other way too. You could create a template in anticipation of onboarding a bunch of new pods from your dashboard, onboard them, and then assign the template right away, and then you're done, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. So once you have a Solstice Cloud account, you can create your templates ahead of time before you even receive pods or before you've got all your pods imported into the Solstice Cloud account. That's a really nice feature to be able to kind of pre-stage how you want your configuration to be ahead of time.
Perfect. Yeah, and then for customers, we have I already have a Solstice Cloud account. Now, will all users have access to change the pod settings?
Yeah, another good question. So that goes back to having role-based permissions and different levels of user account access within Solstice Cloud. So similar to many cloud-based tools, you can define different tiers of permission access per user. And so right now, you can go into the account page within Solstice Cloud, and you get there by clicking the little user icon on the top right, and it will show you all the different users that are attached to the Solstice Cloud account that you have, and you can define which permission level you want them to have. So if you want to invite someone else in, you can give them admin privileges or not. It's up to you.
And so, Mike, people that don't have those privileges can't make changes, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So if someone does not have admin privileges, they will not even be able to see the management interface. So they certainly won't be able to make any changes.
Right. Otherwise, you would have, I'm sure at Mersive, we would have background screen battles that would go on endlessly.
Yeah, that's right. We wanted to provide that capability because there's a lot of folks that want to be able to see the analytics and usage data and even the monitoring data, but you may not want to give all of those folks the ability to the keys to the castle, essentially, to change sensitive security or configuration data on the pod.
Great.
Well, I think this one's interesting because we're kind of in this state too, right? We're all working remotely, as you can probably tell by this webinar. But there's a lot of businesses that are closed right now, and now they can access their pods through the cloud. But what kind of adjustments, what recommendations do you have that they could start doing with management features right now?
Oh, that's an interesting question. We are in different times right now. I think one good thing that you could do right now is, like at the beginning of our demo, we walked through how to create and assign a category construct. And so I made some categories that were based on location or building or environment, whether they're in production use or even been decommissioned, and their and what room types these pods are in. And that's something that you can do right now that you don't have to be in the office to do. I know if you have physical devices that maybe they're not deployed yet, then you can't necessarily go in the office right now and deploy those and get everything physically hooked up. But for everything that is hooked up and all the pods that you're aware of, you can go in and at least get your categories. Whatever category scheme you think is valuable for you. If you want to cluster your devices by location or any other kind of metric, that's something you could do right now, and it will only add more value to you when you start to manage those devices for production use, and it'll also add a lot more value when you start to be able to slice the analytics data by those different metrics.
That's a good point, Mike. You could also, I suppose, if you're about to open an office in Sao Paulo or downtown London, when people start to return to work, you could be right now templating out those settings in anticipation of the return, right? So now, once you've done that, it's really a matter of plugging the pods in and getting them on the network.
Exactly. And even
Cool.
if you haven't deployed pods to a certain location, you can pre-stage what those settings will be, even if there's a separate Wi-Fi access point that you want them to attach there. You can, if you know what that SSID is going to be in that location, you can go ahead and make the Wi-Fi template have it exactly what those pods will need to connect. And when they are ready to connect, then all your settings will be ready to go.
That's nice.
Yeah, Mike, could you touch on how do I add or delete pods to my Solstice Cloud account? Do I need to use the dashboard?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we mentioned earlier, right now you do need to use your dashboard to import pods into your Solstice Cloud account. Once they're already in there, let's say that you have, for whatever reason, a pod that's been decommissioned for whatever reason, you can remove the pod from your Solstice Cloud account, so it's not going to be there as a red dot all the time. And that's under the deployment page in the right hand column. There's a little edit tab that allows you to do that. But your question is an interesting one. It's kind of a timely one because we are working on some workflows, some features that will allow you to get your pods in your Solstice Cloud account before they even arrive, if you're ordering a new pod and all that stuff. So we want to make the step of having to use the dashboard not a requirement going forward. Well, we're not quite there yet. I'm tipping my hand a little bit on what's coming in on the roadmap, but we want to make that operational flow as smooth as possible for you. So we're working on some things there that will say like, hey, if I'm a customer and I buy a new pod, Mersive already knows what Solstice Cloud account I have. Why can't that just be auto imported in there for me? And at that point, I could see that pod in my Solstice Cloud account before it literally even arrives at my office, and I could have the opportunity to, pre-stage some customizations on there and have it ready to go as soon as it's ready to be physically plugged in. That's kind of some of the stuff we're working on. It's not quite ready just yet, but that'll be coming pretty soon.
Yeah, I love that, Mike. I'm envisioning already a status bar of pods I've ordered that says ordered on this date, inbound, and here's the template that I want to assign to it when it shows up. That'll make the staging process so quick.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chris. And it'll even be able to tell you when that pod was deployed. Let's say that you purchased some pods that it was going to a remote office. The Solstice Cloud will know that pod was, purchased at a certain date, then it's en route, and it can even give you an alert when it finally gets plugged in and pops online for the first time.
Cool.
All right, guys, I think one more question And we get this a lot, and we see this question coming through quite a bit on security privacy. You kind of touched on it, but we do have customers international and around the globe. So can you just kind of touch on maybe some of the GDPR compliance and additional thoughts and resources people can access if they have concerns around security?
Yeah, that's a good point. So security and privacy tend to go hand in hand. For the privacy side of things, we are GDPR compliant. We do not collect any personally identifiable data from Solstice users whatsoever. I like to think that, Solstice Cloud, the analytics platform and the management platform, all that, it's really interested in your rooms. Are your rooms performing as they should for your users? It's not interested in collecting user level data on the people that go in there in general. That's kind of our dividing line. So we are really interested in detailed information about how the rooms are being used. We're not interested in collecting any information on the individuals that walk into those rooms and use it. For security, as Chris alluded to earlier, it's kind of baked into our DNA as a software company with the roots that we have. We treat Solstice Cloud security just as seriously as we treat Solstice Pod security. That means routine pen tests by independent third parties. We're very transparent about that. We can make those results available to certain customers under NDA, if requested. Yeah, Chris, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I want to add to that real quick that the way we handle the security profile of all of our products is they definitely go through a third-party pen test, and those results get loaded into a secure data room. If you need to take a look at those, sign an NDA with us, and we'll give you direct access. So it's about transparency with us. What you'll find in that data room are pen tests on the pod, pen tests on Solstice Cloud, and then security response memos that say, here's what we're going to do about any finding, or let's say we have a low finding about some man-in-the-middle attack that could happen. We'll actually respond to that directly and tell you when in the roadmap that will be addressed and how it will be addressed to close any vulnerabilities. Because as you know, security is a constant dialogue. Every time we have a new feature, we need to do a retest. We need to constantly look at how to harden the profiles of all these things. And in fact, every week we're studying the NIST database for vulnerabilities, things like that. So we try to stay on top of this stuff. It's very, very important to both us and you. So definitely, if you're interested, take a look in that data room, talk to your regional sales director, or just reach out directly on the website.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you guys want to touch on? I think we're pretty close to time here.
I'd just like to say thanks to everyone for joining. It's this dialogue that we have with you that allows us to build the solutions that are effective in the market. So please let us know how things go as you start to use Solstice Cloud Management. Don't be shy. Don't hesitate to reach out. And if there's something that would make it a lot more valuable to you, please let us know. We always want to have that kind of feedback. That's how we build our roadmap. That's how we ensure that what we are building for our customers is going to be valuable. So thanks again.
Yeah, I'll definitely second that, Mike. I mean, I know that we had a really extensive beta, for example, with dozens and dozens of international companies and universities taking a look at what we were building over the years. It's really, hopefully we made you proud. We sort of followed your lead on most of these features. But yeah, keep the dialogue going.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it, everyone.
See you, everyone.